Good morning. It's March 31st, 2022. This is To My Liberal Friends, and I'm John Hanno. Joe Biden has not told the truth to the American people and continues to just read the cue cards handed to him by his White House staff. I don't think at his advanced age that he even understands what is in his budget, what it means to the economy, and how it will affect the American people who have to bear the brunt of this rash economic agenda. On Monday of this week, the administration, meaning Joe Biden, released a new budget, and the president had to come out and make some statements about what he's recommending and put the correct spin on these budget proposals. He made several claims, and some of them were not just incorrect, but blatant false statements. Let me give you some examples. Acknowledging that federal budgets and deficits are raging out of control, and they've been doing so for many years, not just under this administration, the president made the following statement, quote, "This year we're on track to cut the deficit by more than $1,300 billion. $1,300 billion. That will be the largest one-year reduction in the deficit in U.S. history," end quote. Now, I only wish this were true because that would have meant we were actually cutting spending. But what Joe Biden did was simply spin the numbers to create the illusion that his administration was doing something to cut spending. The facts are that much of this, quote, spending reduction is the required sunset, that means ending, of the one-time emergency pandemic expenditures. His administration, and by nature him, did nothing to actually cut spending. They're just complying with the law. Another statement that he made that needs to be dissected, quote, "Compared to 2020, we're reducing the size of the deficit relative to our economy by almost 2/3, reducing inflationary pressures and making real headway cleaning up the fiscal mess I inherited," end quote. This is classic Joe Biden trying to have his cake and eat it too. Of course, he has to blame the previous administration. That's what all administrations do. But during those remarks, Biden also admitted that, quote, "Early in the pandemic, it was right to give people help to make ends meet and keep this economy, their economy, going," end quote. In that statement, he was referring to what the Trump administration did on a series of COVID-19 stimulus bills. And here's the doublespeak that I mentioned. He says, as I pointed out, that was the right thing to do, and then in the same speech he says, quote, "The previous administration, as you all know, ran up record budget deficits," end quote. Never mind that much of those deficits were driven by the help Biden had just said was needed to keep the economy going. Of course, this would not be a speech on the economy if Joe Biden, the liberal Democrat, did not refer to the 2017 tax bill that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. In his remarks, he goes right to it by saying, quote, "The Trump administration tax cuts added $2 trillion in deficit spending and largely helped the rich and the largest corporations," end quote. That was the tagline of liberals and Democrats then, and in many cases still is. They're banking on enough people not understanding how the tax bill worked. But even if the New York Times had to finally admit that the 2017 tax bill delivered a tax cut to most Americans. But the facts were skewed by the constant barrage of comments from the media and the Democrats that only the, quote, wealthy benefited from the tax cuts in that 2017 bill. But what the New York Times found out should have put an end to this debate, but Democrats keep harping on it. Overall, 39% of Americans thought they got a tax cut when in fact 65% of taxpayers saw their taxpayers reduced. In every category they measured, they found the numbers skewed by what people thought and what was reality. So let's look at where it really hurts. In the middle class, those making between $30,000 and $50,000, only 38%, according to the New York Times, thought they got a tax cut, but in fact 70% of them did. Those making between $50,000 and $75,000 showed numbers where 41% thought they got a tax cut, and in fact 80% of them did. And finally, those making between $75,000 and $100,000, about 47% of them thought they got a tax cut in the bill, and the number that did was actually 87%. This is the middle class of the country. They got a tax cut, despite what Democrats and their allies in the media keep preaching. The people working for Joe Biden in the White House, they're not dumb. I know several of them personally, and they're pretty smart people. But they're also hyper-partisan, as you would expect. So they trot President Biden out before the press and the American public to make statements that they know are misleading at best and, if truth be told, are just false. But politics on both sides of the aisle is all about power, getting it and retaining it. It's time for the American people to get someone in office that will be straight with them. I'm not sure who that really is at this point, but if it doesn't happen soon, we will be so far down the rabbit hole that we cannot find our way out. Joe Biden is not that leader, not now or not in the future. He's an aging icon that does what his staff tells him to do, and that is as much a part of the problem as the misleading statements that he makes on a daily basis. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.